Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another exciting night of NBA basketball.
With the first pick, the Detroit Pistons select Cade Cunningham from Oklahoma State University.
Chandler again. Oh, what a block by Maxfield! My goodness!
The Pistons are digging in. They got the depth. They got the big men. They got the better basketball team. No doubt about it.
There's Jaden playing the passing lane. Skies a jam. Dynamite dunk, and the crowd loves it.
Pistons need a three, and they have just under 3 seconds to do it. Here's Chauncey Billups. Here it is. He's got it. He's got it. Chauncey Billups hits the three. Overtime. Amazing. Out of bounds. Detroit basketball.
Pistons fans, welcome back to another episode of the Palace of Pistons Podcast, part of the Believe Network. I'm your host, Mike Anguilano. Joining me is the full cast of characters this week, Aaron Johnson and Jasper Apollonia. Aaron, we missed you last week for the big free agency pizzazz and shebang. Are you excited to be back? Because we're excited to have you back. We really missed the level of enthusiasm that you bring to the podcast.
I think the listeners like me being gone. I didn't see as many comments saying all you guys do is talk negatively about the Pistons from last week's show. And it's good to be back, obviously. I'm never going to leave this thing. So sorry to everyone that's going to cry about it in the comments. But it's good to be back and definitely have some thoughts on what the Pistons have and haven't done so far in free agency. We're also going to talk about my favorite thing ever, which is Summer League. So excited to get into all of that and just good to be back on the show. It was unfortunate that I had to miss last week, but back now and ready to get into things.
I love Aaron threatening his own listeners with his presence. That's truly beautiful. That's what podcasting's all about. You know what I mean? It's truly you haven't really made it until everybody who listens to your podcast wants you off of your podcast. So that's a true sign of success. Hopefully one day I'll get to the level that Aaron is, but you know, he's been doing this forever. This is his baby, and I'm just happy to be a part of it once again for this week. So Aaron, welcome back. And I know you've had plenty of time to marinate on these takes you have regarding the Pistons free agency, or should I say lack thereof.
I'll let Mike do his thing, and then I'll give some thoughts. I know you guys obviously did a great job covering everything that took place last week, so I'm not going to set on all that kind of stuff too long, but just did want to go over some of my initial thoughts on what happened.
Yes, absolutely. And Aaron, we are going to get to all of those thoughts because I have been stewing for a full week. But first, I'd like to thank our sponsor for this week's episode, and that is BetOnline. BetOnline is your number one source for all your betting needs. Get the latest odds, lines, and matchup reports for baseball, boxing, golf, and more. BetOnline continues to be the fastest and easiest way to place all your wagers, including live betting and your favorite casino and card games available to play right from your phone. So head on over to the website today or use your mobile device to sign up. Get in on the action. Remember to use our promo code BLEAV, BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's BLEAV for a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit when you use BetOnline. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, Aaron is prepped, primed, and ready to go. First topic for today's show is going to be talking about the happenings or non-happenings of the Pistons free agency. Jasper and I covered that last week in one of the, I think, it's definitely one of the most viewed, at least on YouTube episodes. I saw it at like 1.7 K viewers. I have not had a chance to read the comments. I'm going to do that as soon as this podcast is over because I must see what everyone is talking about. But covered it last week, covered the Joe Harris transaction and then the trade for Monty Morris. Aaron, I will give you the floor to give your thoughts on the only two moves that the Pistons have made this offseason.
Yeah, so for me, I think getting both those players in a vacuum Monte Morris and Joe Harris can certainly help the Detroit Pistons. I think both of them do things that the Detroit Pistons need. Obviously, this was a team that was in need of some wing depth, was in need of some shooting. Something that I believe it was James Edwards III of The Athletic talked about was that the Pistons were actively looking for a veteran point guard. Now, he talked about how he was expecting that to be a veteran that didn't really play, but was just a locker room presence. I think that was definitely my expectation following the Pistons' decision to trade up and select Marcus Sasser. And with already having Killian Hayes and Alec Burks on the roster, that gave them 3 guards off the bench that were going to be ready to come in and play behind Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey, who, by the way, should probably have one of them on the floor at most points throughout the game as well. So the Morris trade was a little bit of a surprise. I like Monte Morris a lot. He's obviously very excited to be here. He's from the state of Michigan, so he's a good player in a vacuum. It wasn't necessarily my biggest concern for what the Pistons need when I look at their roster. Same kind of deal with Joe Harris, where I think he can help this team. I know last year he suffered an injury, wasn't the same shooter, wasn't the same player that he was before that, but he has a very long track record of being successful, of good shooting numbers, of being able to provide value on the court, and the Pistons needed more help on the wing. Now, I think there are some things with that move that definitely strike me the wrong way. It was a move that the Pistons made early in free agency, essentially taking them out of the running for any bigger name free agents like a Cam Johnson. I know, that's something that's been talked about a lot. If this was a move that maybe happened on the back end after the Pistons struck out and missed on everything else, it might be a little bit of a sweeter taste in your mouth. But both these guys are good players. Unfortunately, the elephant in the room is the Pistons are still in need of a starting level 4, and there's really no clear way to get that right now with their cap situation and roster makeup.
Yeah, Aaron, I think that's a really good point you actually just you just brought up regarding the Pistons making that move at the beginning of free agency. I mean, it didn't get finalized until today, but they made it almost immediately. I mean, I actually think it was before free agency technically tipped off. I think it was at 2 o'clock, and and free agency started at 6. So it was a pre-free agency move, and I think you're totally right. It's starting at the beginning, and completely taking the Pistons out of it didn't make sense to me. It was not a very savvy move, in my opinion, because look, for what the Brooklyn Nets are paying Cam Johnson, had they still had Joe Harris on their roster, they would have been pushing up against the second luxury tax apron. And that means paying a lot of money for the team that won 45 games last year. And that was even after losing their 2 biggest stars. So, like, for me, I think you really could have held Brooklyn's feet over the fire if you had held off on that trade. There wasn't a lot of other teams with open cap space that weren't using it in free agency. So it would have been difficult for them to find somebody to take on his $20 million. I think you probably could have gotten assets out of it. Honestly, if somebody had thrown out an offer sheet for Cam Johnson, if you had thrown out an offer sheet for Cam Johnson, there was just a lot of things that didn't happen. I think the problem, Aaron and Mike, is we can agree that these are fine moves in a vacuum. They're both decent players that can help the Pistons, but not very savvy. Doesn't feel like there was a lot of savviness going into these moves. It felt like the Pistons could have come out of free agency with more, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely it does. And then that's the main point for me. It's like, yeah, these guys can definitely help you, but they were the moves you made pre-day one. Like, it just felt like those were moves that could have came at a later time. And not to get too into the weeds, but what was the point of trading up and getting Marcus Sasser if you were just going to trade for Monte Morris, who's now probably going to play over him, as he should, because Monte Morris is a very good backup point guard. But it's like, what was the point of doing that? And if for the people that are going to say, well, Sasser can play the 2, he's more of a 2 anyway. Well, you have Alec Burks on the roster still, and Alec Burks was arguably one of the Pistons' best players. No matter how sad it is to say that, he was one of their best players last season. He's not losing his spot in the rotation either. So now you have Marcus Sasser, who's got 2 guards ahead of him, and just in the backup rotation. And now your number 5 pick, Asar Thompson, there's no clear-cut path for him to get minutes either in the rotation after the addition of Joe Harris. If Joe Harris was a 6'9", 6'10" stretch 4, that trade would look a lot better than him being a 6'5", 2'3", who is going to be coming off the bench when you've already got guys that were presumably going to fill those roles. And now Asar Thompson is, as of now, the 3rd string wing. I don't know. It's a murky situation. Again, the player's good, the fit, the need, a little bit less than I was hoping for from Detroit. And the fact that they have made no other moves since continues to make me worry about how bad this offseason is going to end up being when we look back at it.
So let's talk about one of the players that the Pistons were linked to for months, and then even more so after the hiring of Monty Williams, and that was Cam Johnson. Initially, when the deal came down the pipeline, it was for a pretty high $108.2 million spread over 4 years. We now learned that Cam's deal has a base salary of $90 million. This is coming from Mike Scotto. Anybody?
Scotto.
I'm not taking a swing at this. I've been burned enough times by Tim Forkin. It's not happening. That's a trap.
Well, I just wanted to answer that.
It's a Tim trap. Okay. Well, and anyway, it was reported by Mike Scotto that Cam's 4-year deal has a base salary of $90 million with $4.7 million in projected bonuses, another $13.5 million in unlikely bonuses, and that's how it can reach up to that 108.2. So it's really 4 years, $90 million with really it's like 4 for 95, with quite a bit of unlikely bonuses that could escalate that up to the 108. And I think the general consensus for us was that 108 for 4 years is probably near or at the limit to where I would feel comfortable paying Cam that amount of money, considering he's really just a shooter. He's not an isolation scorer, and his defense is maybe a tad bit overrated. But 4 for 90, 4 for 95 is something I would have been very comfortable with Detroit offering. And it seems like they didn't really put up much of a fight in that. They didn't do a whole lot to put themselves into that ring, despite a long line of reports coming out that said that they were very interested in doing it. So, I'm sure I know the answer to this question, but does this information about Cam's contract change your feeling about the Pistons' pursuit or lack thereof for Cam? Because it certainly does for me.
Well, as someone that was bashed when I said I maybe wouldn't give Cam Johnson $30 million, when you're talking about him getting paid, $90 million versus $108 million, that's a big difference, right? I think the whole Cam Johnson situation has been framed very, very poorly. Everything flipped as soon as he went back to Brooklyn. Before free agency began, Cam Johnson was the biggest Pistons target in years. The Pistons had to have him. He was going to be worth whatever contract he got. He's a great shooter. He's a budding defender. He's a two-way forward. He's exactly what the Pistons need. And that's what we were hearing from the beat writers on down to the fan base on Cam Johnson. And as soon as Cam went back to Brooklyn, everything flipped. And it was, well, he's often injured. And he's really not that great of a defender. And he's already 27. And it's that the whole Cam Johnson situation and the way that it's played out has been so off-putting, and it really has. Not that I was a big believer in the thought processes of Pistons Twitter and whatnot, but for me getting attacked for saying prior to free agency, oh, I don't know if I'd pay Cam Johnson $30 million, and everyone telling me I was crazy and that he was the guy that Pistons had to get, to as soon as Cam going back to Brooklyn, the narrative completely flipping. It just a very, very stupid, to be quite honest, 2 weeks between the week leading up and the week of free agency. Look, I would have paid Cam Johnson a 4-year, $90 million contract with the unlikely incentives 100%. It's a lot different than $30 million a year. So for me, I think it's disappointing that we didn't hear, hey, the Pistons did go very hard after Cam Johnson. He just wanted to stay in Brooklyn. The Pistons put out an offer sheet to Cam Johnson. He just knew he wanted to go back to Brooklyn. And we haven't heard that. So that can't just be assumed and saying, oh, the Pistons tried, because we don't know that. If it was
No, they didn't. Aaron, they didn't try because they made the trade for Joe Harris before free agency even started. It's not even an opinion that, oh, they could have tried. They didn't try at all. They took themselves out of the Cam Johnson sweepstakes before free agency ever kicked off. And I said I wasn't willing to go to $108 million. I thought that was too much. But now that we're looking at the actual breakdown of the contract, 100%, there's no reason Detroit shouldn't have been in on this. And additionally, there is no reason that Detroit should have been helping Brooklyn achieve this contract with this player and help them avoid the luxury tax, the second tax apron. To me, that's insane. That's just terrible, terrible management. How do you not get an asset off of this? How do you not say, look, we're going to throw a poison pill offer sheet at Cam Johnson if you don't attach a first-round pick to Joe Harris or an asset or anything? You could have done anything. But no, what you did was you played nice with Brooklyn. You opened up the cap space for them to go and re-sign Cam Johnson for, in my opinion, a below-market value deal. And people are going to say, oh, well, I don't want to pay him $30 million. You don't know that it would have taken $30 million. You don't even know if the Nets would have matched up to $26 million, because they would have had to have gotten rid of Royce O'Neal's deal just to match up to $26 million. If you paid more than that, they would have had to have gotten rid of somebody actually useful, like Dorian Finney-Smith. So for me, this whole now, like you're saying, Aaron, backtracking, to me, it makes no sense, and it's completely dishonest from an intellectual standpoint. Completely dishonest.
How silly does the Troy Weaver press release, whatever you want to call it, statement that he made, where he said at the, towards the end of the season or whatever, that the team, the organization, the franchise had positioned itself for a high draft pick and armed with a bunch of cap space to make major moves this offseason. Summer's not over. Offseason isn't over. But how silly does that look right now? Because I just find that so rich and so ironic, sitting here and looking at this Pistons roster, which is damn near identical to what it was last year, with the same underlying issues that it had last year. I get it. I'm the negative guy. Whatever. I'm so beyond that at this point.
He's leaning right into it.
You know what? Essentially, I am at this point.
Mr. Negativity.
I don't want it to be this way, but it is this way. This roster is not in a is not majorly different than what it was last season. It really isn't. They're still in dire need of a 4 and have 2 albatross worthy players in Marvin Bagley and James Wiseman. I just feel so we were led astray. We were led astray from what we were promised this summer, and the Pistons, barring another move, barring them getting into some sort of trade, which I don't see being physically possible right now with the way that their cap situation stands. This has been a pretty mediocre offseason for the Pistons, and I don't feel very strongly about them making a significant leap this upcoming season like we were told was coming.
Well,
Yeah.
let me play devil's advocate for just a second. Because I feel like we probably should maybe start to do this. Like every time Aaron says something that might be negative, Jasper and I might have to come in and play devil's advocate.
We can have Mr. Negativity and the nice guy on the same podcast. I'm just saying.
Nice guy, the guy that likes everybody apparently, which is Jasper. He likes everyone, including signing 42-year-old Nick Collison, and somebody actually thinking like that was a good idea. It's just
need to
hilarious.
stretch for it.
But
you need to stretch for it.
Right, you do need to stretch for it, and boy, at 42 he is going to need to do an awful lot of stretching in order to actually play. So,
Mike, he's a veteran presence. Okay, he's a veteran presence. You need those guys in your locker room. I'm not going to say it again.
That's true.
But no, there's
you
another.
Can't even measure that kind of value.
But you're totally. But like, I think you're right though, Aaron, in finishing it by saying like the offseason's not over, and there is still a potential stretch for, arguably, I suppose, and Bojan Bogdanovic still on the roster, who we've been told is eminently movable. On the other hand, we've also been told by him that this was the year where the Pistons were going to be investing in, winning players and putting out money in free agency and via trades, blah, 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 making an investment to win. So which one of those things is true? I don't even know anymore.
It just makes the letter that was penned by Troy Weaver even more hilarious. Now he was talking Bogdanovic off the cliff, saying, "Don't worry, next offseason we're going to get you players." And technically, Troy did not lie. He did, in fact, get him players in the form of Joe Harris, who up until last year played like 15 games the year before, and Monty Morris, who is a very quality backup point guard, but still have a logjam at guard. And then drafting Asar Thompson before making it really interesting by almost maybe thinking about drafting Cam Whitmore. So technically, Troy was correct. He did, in fact, get players and held up his end of the bargain. But Bogdanovic's name has come up in trade talks again. I feel like this is going to be an evergreen topic every other podcast, it seems. Mark Stein of his Substack reported that Bogdanovic is continuing to receive a lot of attention by contenders, and the Pistons are once again looking for draft capital or players and additional assets in the form of compensation. So, I mean, we've answered this question quite literally maybe 20 times in total, 30 times in total since maybe January, maybe even earlier, like November. Any thoughts on trading Bogdanovic, which to me sounds like a really bad idea considering the lack of shooting, and especially the lack of shooting at the wing, and especially the lack of shooting by somebody who could theoretically defend or play at the four. But again, if somebody comes with a decent package of assets, Detroit should probably look to move on. But again, if we are to believe Troy Weaver in the front office that they want to compete for at least the play-in spot this year, then you probably shouldn't be trading Bogdanovic unless you're getting a ready to plug and play shooter in their place, which just is not going to happen. So, guys, any additional thoughts now that we've added Joe Harris to the roster? Any additional thoughts on moving on from Bogdanovic and picking up, a couple of picks or a pick and or a young player?
Mike, I want to answer your question with a question. And this is both to you and Aaron. Do either of you feel like this is, because we've talked about Bogdanovic and what we'd move him for a million times, do either of you feel like this is going to end up being anything other than it was for like the whole Jeremy Grant situation, where we were told the entire time that every team in the league, every contender, everybody wants this guy. There's a high price point, but that's because you can get it. And ultimately you end up settling for, look, don't get me wrong. I'm extremely happy with Jalen Duren. That worked out fine. But you got the 13th pick in the draft out of Jeremy Grant. That's ultimately what you got. Do you guys feel like it's going to be any different than that situation with Bogdanovic? Do you even more so, do you even feel like you're going to get anything close to what you got for Jeremy Grant at this point, because Bogdanovich isn't as good as a defender, and he's making more money.
Probably not. Probably not. I mean, it's not a situation that the Pistons should want to be in right now. Having to trade Bogdanovich, who's one of your, again, few shooters, few guys that I guess in theory can play the 4, even though he really shouldn't at this point in his career, to get a legitimate 4 is really the only pathway that this team has to filling that hole. Now, the reality of it is the Pistons might not even feel this is an issue. They might feel fine with Isaiah Stewart because they seemingly want to continue to use him and develop him as a 4. And they might be fine using their power forward minutes between Isaiah Stewart, Bogdanovich, Isaiah Livers if he's healthy. And then if they want to keep Marvin Bagley, I don't know. What I'll say is this. The only way the Pistons could potentially get a starting level 4 is if they moved off Bogdanovich. But it also wouldn't make sense because A, their asking price or what they want reportedly is young players and picks. And B, if a team is trading for Bogdanovich, they're probably a contending level team and wouldn't want to be trading starting level players off their roster. So the Pistons probably aren't getting a starting level 4 from said team.
Mike? I mean, really?
Yeah, I mean, they're probably not. You know, they've been dangling you can get them with a first round pick and stuff, or a high first round pick and lesser stuff. They've been doing that for almost 1 year now. It's just he's older, he's making more money. Well, not anymore, not after the ridiculous contract that Grant just signed, but I mean, probably not. And if they were getting first round picks last year and didn't pull the trigger, I know that certainly stings a lot more now, knowing that you're going to get even less at this point. Compound that he had a great season last year when he was healthy, and was probably at his maximum value. I mean, yeah, you're probably not going to get what you're asking for. And I'm pretty sure that every other team knows that at this point, that you could probably put in a low ball offer to, because it clearly seems like the Pistons are trying to clear their cap situation for next summer instead of right now, because Joe Harris is an expiring. Well, we can only speculate. I don't know. I really thought this was the off season where they were going to, be aggressive for some players to fit around their young guys. And obviously that didn't happen, but I don't know. But I don't know of any other reason why you'd had Joe Harris so early, unless you knew for sure that Cam Johnson was not going to come to Detroit. If you knew for sure that he wasn't going to do that, and yes, of course, then you do what Brooklyn did to teams like 8 years ago with Alan Crabb and Tyler Johnson. Then you just inflate the offer and force them to pay a ridiculous contract, which they didn't. And I get that, but if you knew that you weren't going to be getting Cam and you needed a shooter, I don't know why else they would go after Joe Harris in order to free up cap space and have greater flexibility next offseason. Who they're going to go after, I don't know. I'm sure that Troy Weaver doesn't know either.
But you could have.
I can't think of any other reason.
But you could have signed Cam Johnson to an offer sheet and then held Brooklyn over a freaking barrel, and then traded for Joe Harris. Right? Am I crazy? Am I making things up here? No. Like, is that something that couldn't have happened? Because I feel like I'm going insane sometimes with this organization, because there is such a lack of savviness in so many of these moves. There's such like a complete misunderstanding of the value of assets, the value of players, that it just boggles the mind. And I'm not saying that they haven't come out on top ever of any of these transactions, but like, this is a front office that paid Kelly Olynyk $13 million a year 2 years ago. This is one that just paid Marvin Bagley last offseason $13 million. that traded for James Wiseman, who this year is going to be making what, like $11 million? And that's what you're investing in your front court. You also have Isaiah Stewart, who is coming up for an extension. Who the hell knows what's happening with that as well? So for me, I mean, the more I'm getting into this, it feels like a Ponzi scheme at this point. It's like a pyramid scheme where seriously, no, where this front office, this GM is asking us to invest. And as we invest, don't worry, the money's there. You're getting the money back. You're going to win. You just need to keep investing a little bit more, because once we get these draft picks in here, once we get the investments, then we can pay you back out. That's what it's starting to feel like, where it's like, okay, but I've been asked, you've been promising me my money back now this season. I'm not getting my money back. Where's my money, Troy Weaver? Where's my money? Where's my investment back? I'm not seeing it. So for me, the more I'm getting into this, it seems like somebody who doesn't know what they're doing, continuing to say, just trust me, and they have their disciples, and that's where we're at right now. And until the bottom falls out, everybody's on board. Or am I, again,
Jasper,
am I just crazy?
You just don't have the stomach for a rebuild. That's all that this is saying.
You just don't understand how a rebuild works, man. You just don't
Like,
understand.
Aaron, am I going too far? I genuinely want you guys to tell me if I sound like I'm coming off like
No.
a raving lunatic.
Next offseason, the Pistons are going to have a ton of cap space in a terrible free agency class. And on top of that, they've positioned themselves for a top pick and a terrible NBA draft class. It's a part of the process, bro. You just got to trust Daddy Troy.
I feel like I'm like, I don't know, man. I feel like a Kings fan or something. No, you know what I feel like right now? I feel like a Marlins fan. That's honestly what I feel like. I'm just having the there's all this stuff going into it. No, once we get here, once we do that, then we'll start spending the money. Then we'll start spending the money. No, we just got to kick the can down the road another couple of years.
You are not kidding. The free agency class next offseason is not good. And one of those players that was at the top of the list already signed his extension. That's DeJounte Murray. That happened during the podcast for 4 years, 120
million. And guess what?
Not that you are signing DeJounte Murray.
No. And guess what, Mike? It's going to be the same deal in 2025. You know why? Because good teams don't let good young players hit free agency. Period. They straight up don't. That's just, you don't let that happen. You extend your young guys or the restricted free agents, in which case you match the offer sheet. But like, where is Detroit spending this money? I keep on hearing, well, they can make these trades, but where? When is the last time they got involved in anything similar to that? What, the Bogdanovich? I'm sorry, that's a middling move. That's a C-type move. It doesn't change the landscape at all. This is not something significant. And to me, it's just frustrating to keep on hearing the same things year after year. And it's like, now we're up at the deadline that you set. Troy Weaver, you set this. I'm sorry, the beat writers, they also bear responsibility in this because they've been reporting it as if it's fact. There hasn't been any sort of pushback by the beat writers saying, hey, you know what? This team might, despite what Troy Weaver is saying, this team might not be ready by 2023-24. Have you seen anything of them saying that before this offseason? Any of that? Was there any pushback on what Troy Weaver was saying?
Nope.
I didn't see it.
Not significantly, no. Honestly.
Okay, so then why are these guys? So why is there no lack of accountability here? Why is there a total lack of accountability? Why do all these people still get seen in the same light? There's no loss of trust here. There's no loss of credibility. What is going on?
I think if the Pistons don't, because you're right, and I'm just trying to play devil's advocate. Getting Joe Harris and Monty Morris and then going back to bed is not in any way what we pictured the offseason going like, and it's not how it was painted to all of us by Troy Weaver and those covering the team. in the doldrums of February when everything was just cold and horrible, could not have pictured this being the offseason. I mean, getting the fifth pick was already, a kick in the gonads to start. And then an offseason of, collecting an expiring contract and a very good backup point guard. Those are moves that, a team that is already ready to win makes, moving things around the margins, getting a player here, getting a good, role player there. Just trying to play devil's advocate. It was objectively not a good offseason so far. And to me, you have two giant players potentially on the move in Harden and Damian Lillard in two very complicated situations. Very complicated. The Cavs are like the poster child of being a bad team that just kind of sneaks into one of those gigantic players needing moved, and it was Harden, and they got Jared Allen out of it. Not saying the Pistons will get a complete, young stud out of it, but this is sort of their last opportunity this offseason to really get in on a transaction and find an impact player in some capacity. If they can come in and sneak their way in, and I know there's no precedent that they would do this, but if they could, then our feelings about this offseason would certainly be a lot different. That's sort of the last opportunity. If they don't do that, and it really is just a Sar Thompson, Joe Harris, Monty Morris, and they cut Eugene Amarui, and that's it. Yeah, I mean that's to me that is a failure, a complete failure, considering all the hype and all the cap space. Because we were saying this all last year. Look at all of the cap space. Look at all of the cap space, and then end up with, very little to show for. Of course, it's an objective failure, and heads could roll, other than Monty Morris's head.
Next year, just wait on it.
I know, it just sucks.
There's just no.
But the offseason is not.
Just no standard.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Aaron.
I just want to say there's no standards in turning this thing around. The amount of people that are fine with just sitting around and waiting year after year after year for something to change. It's absurd. Since when did the standards of the Detroit Pistons become so freaking low? This is an organization, this is a franchise that has a rich history in the NBA, that is home to some of the greatest teams, emphasis on teams in league history. It's asinine that there are no standards, and there's nowhere near as much uproar as there should be over how poorly this organization continues to churn out teams year after year after year. And this bubble around Troy Weaver, who is put up on this pedestal like he is some phenomenal general manager that graced the Detroit Pistons with his presence, and that we shouldn't ever question any single move that he makes because he has the almighty plan in mind. It's insane, the backers that he has that are willing to bend the knee to every decision that he makes, no matter how much it doesn't coincide with what the organization, what the team needs to actually be doing if they are going to get better. The thing that he said that this organization was going to do this offseason, there are no standards, and there are too many people willing to sit around year after year after year and watch this organization, watch this team, watch this franchise continue to sit at the bottom of the standings while every other team moves faster and faster up across the standings, up across the pecking order. I mean, really, the only other team that's in this situation with Detroit is the frickin' Charlotte Hornets. Even
you know what it is?
Who had as terrible of an offseason in terms of how they spent their money in free agency. Like, even they're putting themselves in a position to at least be somewhat better, somewhat more competitive, are putting legitimate players, at least trying to put legitimate players around their younger guys. I mean, the people that protect every word and decision that comes from Troy Weaver, it's insane. There are no standards, and it's disappointing. Sorry.
I have a word for it, Aaron. It's the Lions-ification of the Pistons fan base. That's really what it is. It reminds me of Matt Patricia and his disastrous tenure along with Bob Quinn, where it was, to me, obvious. Year 2, that it was not going to work. I mean, really, for me, that I knew it in my soul when they got absolutely mollywopped by the frickin' Jets in his first game. At that moment, I knew it was over. But like, I knew it was over on an intellectual basis. Year 2, these guys were idiots, and they had no idea what they were doing, and they had smartest guy in the room syndrome, which is something that Troy Weaver has as well. And it's something that leaks into the fan base. I heard so many excuses for Matt Patricia, and Bob Quinn too. And it's absolutely unbelievable to be seeing it play out once again with Troy Weaver and once again with the Pistons fan base, where you have these people who sit back and just eat the crap that the organization shovels into their mouths yearly, year after year, 60 wins in 3 years. And you have these armchair analysts sitting back and saying, you just don't get it. You just don't get it. You don't understand what Troy's doing. What's the inside information you have? He knows better than you. The second you start saying, well, this GM knows more than you do, that is when I'm instantly like, oh, you drank the Kool-Aid, buddy. You drank the Kool-Aid. You're fully into the Jim Jones cult. Because for me, that if you can't back up with actual logic and reasoning, it's all trust, then you're just a cult member. And it's the cult of Trust Troy right now, the cult of Daddy Troy. It reigns supreme in the Pistons fan base. And it's sad because I remember when people used to get pissed off that this team sucked. And now they're not even mad. They're happy. Oh, it's another pick. Another pick. We kept the cap clean for another year, fellas. Isn't that great? Trust in Troy. The plan's all coming together. Any year now. Any year the Lions are going to be making the Super Bowl, right?
So I guess I am the nice guy of the podcast for this week.
The thing is, I don't want to be the negative guy. This isn't what
No.
I'd be more
you're
than
both
happy
being
for the Pistons to right the ship and turn things around. Like, if you think that I want to watch a team win 15, 20 games every season and just bitch and moan about everything that they do, like, if you think that I enjoy that, you've got the wrong idea. Because the season that they made the playoffs against Cleveland, let's not even talk about the Milwaukee series in 2018 or whatever, but the series against Cleveland, I mean, those were the best 4 games of my life, unfortunately, that I could truly sit back and recall every possession. You know, unfortunately, I'm on the younger side where I was a pretty young kid when the 03, 04 teams were playing, the going to work Pistons were playing. Nobody wants this team to be better more than I do. Like, I want the Pistons to be good. I don't want to be sitting here complaining and whining that this team's going to suck again. Like, I want them to be a good team.
No, but you're right, Aaron. There needs to be a standard. And the standard there isn't even a standard right now. What is the standard for this team? I genuinely, and like, what is the plan? Because you can say, well, if the draft picks don't pan out, then it's all meaningless. And that is true. You need your guys to pan out. But Cade Cunningham is coming up for his extension at the end of next season. And again, we've already laid out that there aren't any good free agents in next year's class. So once you start paying Cade Cunningham, once you start paying Isaiah Stewart, once you start paying all these guys, are you going to pay James Wiseman? What's going to happen there? Killian Hayes, is he getting a second contract? All these guys, once you have to pay them, then that cap space in free agency, it dries up. It's gone. Once you pay 2 guys a max deal, guess what? You don't get any more money to spend in free agency. You're over then. So where are you making a move in this next year, 2 years, that is going to elevate your squad from a talent perspective and also maintain your young roster? Where is that going to happen?
Well, it's unfortunately going to happen based off of a lot of internal growth of the young players that are already on this roster, and many of those players you will be able to watch at Summer League. There we go.
Thank God for Mike.
We escaped.
Thank God for Mike.
We escaped the black hole. Summer League it's right around the corner. It's on Saturday, and there's already some games happening now over in Salt Lake City. So the Pistons will start playing in the Las Vegas Summer League. I saw it's 102 degrees there. It sounds awful. But they will play starting Saturday against the Orlando Magic or the Orlando Michigan Wolverines, depending on what players are going to be playing. Key players that the Pistons will have in Summer League include Jaden Ivey, Jalen Duren, both probably not for very long, Asar Thompson, James Wiseman, Isaiah Livers, and Marcus Sasser, who did sign his contract as well. So, I mean, one of the more intriguing Summer League teams and Summer League rosters. You got a lot of NBA level talent on that squad, and a lot of very intriguing players. Livers is well regarded by Troy Weaver. He's one of the few wings who can shoot on the roster. Wiseman's obviously a grab bag of who knows what you're going to get. And then Asar Thompson and Sasser are, your most recent picks, and you want to see them play and see what you got. Aaron, you are the Summer League, probably the biggest Summer League fan out of the three of us. So I'll defer to you first. But what are you hoping to see out of Summer League for the Pistons?
Obviously, the intrigue is there for me. I think with the Pistons sending so many guys from their actual roster to Summer League, it's intriguing for everyone, and it feels like more of the rosters going every year here recently. But for me, that's okay because I really enjoy watching it. Obviously excited to see, how Jalen Duren and how Jaden Ivey fare against competition that quite frankly, they should be far superior than. They should be guys that stand out as those players that are dubbed too good for summer. Think of guys this year that have already started playing really, really well. Trey Mann for the Oklahoma City Thunder, Keegan Murray for Sacramento. Like, they need to be in that same discussion. I think the biggest one for everyone, at least in my mind, is what it should be, is Asar Thompson. How does he look against this level of competition? There was all this talk, from myself included, about how tough it was to gauge the overtime elite competition that he played against while there. Something that, for me, somewhat held him back in the pre-draft process because he wasn't playing against professional club teams overseas, wasn't playing college basketball, wasn't even in the G League where he was playing some older guys. He was playing in overtime elite. So how does he fare against this size, this age group, this level of competition, guys that are going to be bigger, stronger, older than him, more experienced than him? That's obviously a big intrigue. If he's shooting, how much is he shooting? What does the shot form look like? Obviously, that's a big discussion point around his game right now. Something that's going to have to improve is his outside shot. So where does that, look? Not that it's going to be leaps and bounds better than what it was, a few months ago with overtime elite or in the pre-draft process, but you would think that it should look a little bit better. There should be some work being done on it now that he's been in the organization, for a couple weeks. And that's where my intrigue is, seeing these guys. I think someone like James Wiseman, like, if he doesn't look great against this competition, it'd be a real shame. I think this is a type of layout for him that he should succeed in. The defense isn't usually all that great. He's going to be one of the biggest guys on the court. He definitely has more experience than a lot of the other guys on the court, so he should look good. And Isaiah Livers being healthy and playing, something that the Pistons are sort of really relying on at this point with the way the roster is currently constructed. So how he fares, certainly a vantage point that I'll be watching as well. Super, super excited for Summer League. Just interested to see the guys come out. And we should kind of sort of to get a little bit of a look at the philosophy under a new coaching staff. Jarrett Jack going to be coaching this Piston group under as part of Monty Williams' coaching staff for the Pistons. So we should get a little bit of a look inside of, what type of mentality, what type of philosophy this new coaching staff is going to bring to this young group.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm totally with Aaron, lockstep in the things that he's looking for from there. Absolutely. Like Duren, Ivy, even Wiseman to a lesser extent, and Isaiah Livers should look like the best players out there. And I don't anticipate Ivy and Duren especially playing more than one, maybe two games. It'll be fun to see some of the old names out there too, like Xavier Simpson's on the roster, Kiefer Sykes, who is a MAC legend, of course. And I think, I'm not even going to try with his last name, but the Pistons off-season free agent post-draft signing of Tosan, the kid out of Princeton, that's a guy I'm going to have my eyes on as well. I think for me, it's really more about what does Marcus Sasser bring to this team? Has James Wiseman shown any improvement? Not even necessarily in terms of like his individual game, but like, is he stronger? Does he look better? Because he had a very uninspiring physical body for a third-year NBA player, to be completely honest. Like, he's just too weak as of right now, and that's definitely a problem. So I want to see some more physical strength with James Wiseman. With Asar Thompson, I get what you're saying, Aaron, but to be honest, with the way that the Summer League is structured, which is to say minimally, I don't think it's going to be that big of an issue for him. I think because of his athleticism, because of his natural instincts, he's going to look really good in Summer League. And I would be kind of surprised if he doesn't. I think for me, I'm more looking to see what his shot looks like when he's off ball. And yeah, more of like, what are the off ball things that he does? What are the things that he does that are going to be more integral to the role he's going to be playing in the NBA as he starts off? Because like we've said, the Pistons have a lot of guards on this roster, and he's not going to have the ball in his hands all that often to begin his career. So I want to see what he can do in terms of those structured off-ball movements.
Yeah, that's a roster of a lot of intrigue. Like I said, that's a lot of NBA level talent that is going to be worth watching during Summer League. And I know that Aaron's favorite time of the year. I know that you are going to be watching, and I'm going to be relying on you if Jasper and I can't watch it. But a lot of intriguing names. Yes, some of those guys like Isaiah Livers, they really should be some of the best players out there on the floor. And if they're not, then we have a problem, to say the least. But a lot of intriguing talent. I'm very excited to see Asar Thompson for sure. See that athleticism against other guys that are scrapping for rosters on their respective teams. So it'll be very interesting. Guys, we've had a long podcast with a very meaty middle of vitriol and hate, but we are nearing the end of this episode. Is there anything else you want to say before we go ahead and wrap up this edition of the podcast as we get into?
I love the Pistons. I want them to be good. I want them to have standards. That's it.
Yeah, I think Jasper said it well there. I don't really have anything else to add on that. I think he said it for me.
Good. And I think we agree. We just want the best for this team. And, like I said, there are still two albatross superstars still waiting to be moved in James Harden and Damian Lillard. And, the Pistons could sneak in on one of those very complicated trades and maybe come away with something that will change the outlook for the offseason. But, as it currently stands, we are disappointed. We'll put it lightly and politically correct. A little disappointed in the offseason. But, of course, there is still a little bit of time to go before the regular season. Plenty of things can still happen. And we hope that you will join us if and when those things do happen. We'll be covering it, as well as findings from the Summer League. We'll have all of that and more on palacepistons.com. Please check out our written content. We'll be doing season previews before you know it, and we'll have all of those pieces on the website as well. And that's going to do it for this edition of the Palace Pistons podcast. I'd like to thank my co-hosts, of course, even through all of the yelling. I love the content. I love the back and forth. I really do enjoy it every week, and I hope that you guys do too. So for my co-host, Jasper Apollonia, Aaron Johnson, I am Mike Anguilano. Thank you so much for joining us in this edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast, part of the Believe Network, and we will see you all next time.